Hello everyone, my name is Anitsu and I'm back with another Digimon video. So today I'm going to be talking about the tier list. And more specifically, this is going to be the BT10 tier list. So while BT10 is a shorter format than some others that we had in the past, it still has a pretty interesting and defined meta based on some of the new emerging decks and the decks that were good from previous formats that are tending to stick around just because their game plans and gameplays are very solid. So if anyone's unfamiliar with how I do deck lists, I don't necessarily break it up into tiers. I kind of just do it in a meta, rogue, and casual setting. So the meta is basically what you're going to be expected to see in a lot of events. Rogue are going to be those decks that are going to still show up in a lot of events, but have a harder time topping compared to a lot of the other more meta decks. And then casual, I'm just lumping as everything else, just because there's still just a lot of different decks that you could play in Digimon that are still somewhat viable. It's just the casual decks are going to be more infrequent than the rogue decks. So as far as what's on everyone's mind, what is going to be the meta? So I think that the meta is going to basically be just the top decks from BT10 on top of the top decks from BT9. So Cross Hearts is looking to be the new and emerging deck that's going to take the meta by storm and warp the meta around it. So the fact that it is a very easy and accessible deck with some very simple and strong game plans make it a deck that's going to be very easy for a lot of people to attain, and a deck that's going to be a good contender just because it is a flood/swarm style of deck where you're trying to, well, flood the field with your tamers. Your tamers are ideally going to be playing your Digimon, and then on top of them playing your Digimon, they're going to be helping you set up with some extra resources to line up big Digicross plays, and it has some very explosive plays just because of Shoutmon Cross 4 and Shoutmon Cross 5. Then, as far as some of the other really strong decks that are going to be represented in the meta, we're still going to have Metal Garurumon and Alphamon from the previous set, just because, well, they were still good then, and they're still good now, especially without any restrictions or limitations. Then Blue Flares is going to emerge as another really top contending deck, just because it is another Digicross deck with a whole bunch of different solid game plans where it's not solely relying on Digicross, but it uses Digicross to be able to try to stunlock the opponent's Digimon, similar to how Blue Hybrids worked. And then on top of that, we're going to have Black War Greymon be a persistent threat, just because he's one of the few decks that could actually deal with Tamers, so he's a good deck to take into the Cross Hearts matchup and even into the Blue Flare matchup, just because deleting their Tamers is going to stop and shut off some of their game plan, and that's going to be super disruptive, on top of him just already being a pretty strong deck before. Then, similarly to Black War Greymon, we're going to have Dark Knightmon as another good deck at trying to delete the opponent's Tamers and keep and maintain Digimon, and those Digimon also will probably be blockers, or if not blockers, just still be very disruptive towards the opponent's overall game plan. Then we're also going to still see Grandis because, again, similarly to Alphamon, Black War Greymon, and Metal Garurumon, it is one of the better OTK-based decks. Then, on top of that, the last deck is going to be the Minerva Loop deck. So, the Minerva Loop deck is basically Lilith Loop 2.0, where we're trying to abuse Cerberusmon and Cerberusmon Werewolf mode to be able to gain a lot of memory and be hyper-aggressive, and it's a really good deck to take into Cross Hearts, but it does have some poor matchups in some other areas, but it's still just an overall generally strong deck. And then as far as some of the more rogue decks, I think that D-Reapers is still going to be a deck that's going to be hanging around just because it was already abusing Death X, and Death X is already a very good card, on top of the fact that it's still just a very strong style of gameplay that the opponents generally can't necessarily shut down. On top of the fact that security control is still going to be a thing, and security control is going to be even more obnoxious with more strong level 6 Digimon that it can play around with for the yellow side of things, on top of everything that it was already doing before. Then we do have Armor Rush as another prominent deck that's still going to be sticking around, mostly just because it is a good deck to take into the Cross Hearts matchup, because if you're able to tempo and speed into your Magnamon X Antibody, then his redirect ability can basically shut out Cross Hearts, which is super important to be able to beat Cross Hearts, because if you could stop their aggro lines of play, then, well, they can't really do much of anything. On top of that, we're going to have a new version of Jessamon. So Jessamon did get a starter deck, and his starter deck, it did add a lot of extra toolboxing that we can do with our Sistermons, and even easier ways to be able to play our Sistermons. And with all of the new Huckmon support, it does make the deck a little bit more consistent, but it still does have some slight consistency issues, but it's still going to be a very powerful deck when it's firing on all cylinders. Then, as far as probably my most controversial deck on this list is going to be Sakuyamon as one of the best current yellow deck in the format, just because she's fleshing out and rounding out what Sakuyamon was doing all the way back in EX2, where it's trying to play and use our plugins to their utmost potential, and Sakuyamon Maid Mode, the fact that we could use it in combination with the other Sakuyamon to kind of go back and forth between the forms, and then lots of extra ways and more powerful plugins that we could play, just make it a very appealing deck. Then, on top of that, we also have Bloomlord. Bloomlord is going to be another swarm-based deck, where we're trying to suspend our Digimon to play more Digimon, to suspend our Digimon for even more benefits, and it is a really powerful deck, but it's still lacking some really good control tools to really push it along. Then we also have the Mastimon and Ophani decks. I know they're two separate decks, but I'm lumping them into the same slot just because they're utilizing some very similar parts and pieces and tools. It's just one is using DNA, the other is not. But regardless, you're still utilizing a really powerful option suite to be able to replay your level 4s and level 5s, to be able to re-go into your level 6s super easily and try to control and mitigate the opponent's field. And in Mastimon, we have Lucimon Chaos Mode to be able to also pick apart the opponent's tamers if we're able to reuse that card over and over again. But even at worst, just one instance at trying to get rid of their most important tamer could be enough to set them far enough back. And then the last deck on this list is going to be D-Brigades, because, well, D-Brigades, like D-Reapers, is another Flood-style deck where we're trying to go as wide as we possibly can and play as aggressive as we possibly can, similar to Crosshearts, except we're not playing Tamers to be able to play our Digimon, we're just playing Digimon to put them into the trash to line up a big Darkdramon finish. And it's still one of the more powerful and aggressive style of swarm decks that we currently have in the game. But that's just a quick and dirty rundown of what I think is going to be meta. Just because your deck or a deck isn't necessarily on this list, it doesn't mean it's still not good. It's just, this is just my interpretation on what I think the meta is going to be in BT10, even though it is going to be very short-lived. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.